Welcome to our talk on combining work and study. And thank you, HERDSA, for accepting our abstract. I'd like to tell you about a story that I've been conducting with my colleague, Jason, who used to be at the University of Auckland with me, but has now moved on to AUT. I'm Susan Geertshuis, and I'm from the business school in the University of Auckland. We've been hearing a great deal recently about the imperative for lifelong learning and how outdated the notion is that you can come to university once early in your life and then be equipped for your whole career. Universities are expecting people to return to university throughout their lives, possibly to update on their own profession, to learn about developments that have happened, but also possibly to convert to whole new careers. And in response, partly to this imperative, universities are developing taught master's programs. And I know in my university, almost every faculty has taught master's programs now that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. Now, if you look in the literature, there's very little research on the students who come to taught master's programs. And what is there is suggesting that they're quite a different cohort. The notion is that universities have evolved to serve undergraduates on taught programs, and undergraduates by and large are at the start of their lives. And universities are more used to delivering postgraduate programs that are research-based rather than taught. So it's probably that we're geared up better to serve undergraduates on taught programs than we are to serve postgraduates on taught programs who may have families and often have careers as well that they have to combine with their studies. So this is the topic that we wanted to understand. And we thought an ideal site for our research would be our MBA program. It's quite substantial. It's been going for a long while. We think we're quite good at it. And so as part of a larger study, we surveyed our students and we asked them, there were both rating scales that they completed and they had opportunities to answer qualitative questions, open-ended questions as well. And in general, they were very positive about many of the outcomes of the program. They were feeling more able to think critically, more able to think creatively, better able to communicate, able to solve problems. And their outlook, their long-term outlook, was very positive. Almost all of them felt that attending the MBA program was going to have a positive impact on their careers. But this very good news was countered by something a little more worrying. When we asked them about the impact of their studies on their current work performance, the picture wasn't so clearly positive. There were people that said their studying was having a negative impact on their work or no impact. Some that said it would have a positive impact, of course. But this was worrying for us. This is an MBA program. Their studies are supposed to be directly relevant to what they're doing. Even more worrying, when we said what has been the impact of studying on your personal lives, the majority said that studying had had a negative impact on their personal lives. We wanted to look a little bit more deeply into this and assess their stress levels. Their perceived stress levels were recognizably high, but not evenly distributed across the subcomponents. And it seems that our students are feeling fatigued and overloaded, which we've interpreted as suggesting that their personal lives, their working lives, and their studies, none of them are too much if you think of them individually, if you have to approach them singularly. But in combination, it's too much. We also assessed their well-being. And historically, we think about well-being as being a negative thing, about depression and anxiety, but now there's a recognition that there are positive aspects to well-being too. So enthusiasm is energizing. And contentment is a more passive side of well-being, but it's also positive. And what you can see here is our students are enthusiastic but anxious. So these are the activated aspects of well-being. And we found that there's a nice positive association between enthusiasm and displaying independent learning characteristics or lifelong learning characteristics. There's a negative association between feelings of depression. This isn't clinical depression. This is kind of feeling down now and again or a bit fed up. And displaying characteristics of lifelong learning or independent learning. And I found this finding in other studies with quite different students. So I feel it's stable. So what we're finding here is that our programs are overburdening, or combining work and study seems to be overburdening students to the extent that it's having a negative impact on their personal lives, sometimes a negative impact on their working lives, and also a negative impact on the way they learn. So is there anything we can do? This slide is a combination of what we've inferred from student statements and direct suggestions from students, because after all, maybe they know best. One of the most common things they referred to was workload. Not so much that the workload should be reduced, although that comment was there, but rather that we could need to even out the workload. So our traditional way of teaching involves substantial assessments at the end of courses. But because students are very busy and have commitments elsewhere, it's very difficult, they were saying it's quite difficult to set aside your life and your work in order to revise for a big exam or in order to complete a big assignment. And particularly for people doing 2 courses at once or more, if we don't coordinate ourselves so they have 2 or 3 things to do at once, then it becomes just too much. So they're asking if we could perhaps be a little bit more innovative with our assignment design and even out that workload. They also suggested more flexibility. So I think with the undergraduate programs, we think that they possibly need to learn about deadlines and how important deadlines are. And the suggestion from the comments of more mature learners was that life and work has taught them all that they're ever going to know about deadlines, and maybe we could be a little bit more flexible. And I think I agree. We design our assignments so that they're learning experiences. And if we are inflexible with our deadlines or our requirements, students just rush them and they crash through. And so they don't have the opportunity to learn from our carefully designed work that they should have. There was also some comments about how frustrating it is when you're alone at home or part-time student and you can't find stuff, you can't follow instructions, or your lecturer has carefully placed something important in somewhere obscure in the learning management system that possibly makes great sense to them, but not to you. And I think we have to realize that sometimes these students are quite alone, so they can't ask each other or ask our support systems so easily as can our undergrad students. So there were some really good suggestions for us for removing obstacles or stressors. There were more positives. There were positive suggestions too. The students really enjoyed the social engagement with their cohort, that they drew a lot from each other and they had a lot of support from each other. There was even the suggestion that perhaps university should facilitate the involvement of partners in social events and create some feeling of belonging that extended beyond the enrolled students. And that might help their partners understand their challenges. There were very few suggestions about belonging to the university as a whole, almost as though they didn't expect to do that when they were part-time and busy. They did talk about how wonderful it is when you have an inspiring lecture or you're discovering something that you'd never realized before. And this seemed to really buoy them up and make it worthwhile. Similarly, they talked about relevance. If there's an assignment that's hard and it doesn't seem relevant, or an exam or a test, and they can never see why they might use this, then that seemed to be depleting for them. On the other hand, a taxing assignment that was hard but relevant seemed not to cause them so much anxiety. They seemed prepared to work hard to gain that wonderful knowledge. So I think this study, which is after all a preliminary study, has given us a lot of information on how we can maintain the levels of learning, the complexity of the ideas we share, and the standards we seek to support in our students, but can also accommodate busy lives and so make learning a little bit easier for our students. And I think I'd like to leave the last word to one of our students who kind of captures the problems they face and that maybe we can help them with a little better. And she says, it's the hours. They just take time away from family and work, a lot of pressure from multiple directions. It's a constant juggle of priorities. Thank you so much.